They say your life can change in a single night. I never believed that until it happened to me. The night it began, I was driving home after a double shift at the hospital. My eyelids felt heavy, my hands stiff on the wheel. The radio hummed low in the background, a half-forgotten song I wasn't really listening to. Beyond the windshield, the world stretched in long shadows. The kind of endless black country road where time itself seems to stall. Nursing isn't a career, it's a devotion, a burden and sometimes a cage. I loved helping people, but after years of exhaustion, endless demands, and pouring myself empty for strangers, I often wondered if anyone saw me anymore. My life had shrunk to small routines, work, home, sleep. And in the silence between them, something hollow grew. That night, though, silence wasn't my only companion. The forest on either side of the road pressed close, thick with skeletal trees whispering in the cold wind. My headlights slashed through mist that clung to the branches like ghostly fingers. Every so often, the fog parted, and I thought I glimpsed something moving, dark shapes, shifting shadows. I told myself it was nothing more than deer. But a prickle ran down my neck, sharp enough that I adjusted my rearview mirror twice, just to be sure I was alone. IWSN single quotes T. It began with the dreams. For weeks, I'd been waking in the night, drenched in sweat, heart pounding from visions I couldn't explain. Golden eyes staring at me from the dark. A voice, low and broken, whispering my name as though it belonged to me. And always, the feeling of being watched, hunted, chosen. I laughed it off at work when exhaustion dragged at me, blaming it on too much caffeine or too little sleep. But deep down, I knew it was more. That night, the dream slipped into reality. I had just rounded a bend in the road when my headlights caught something ahead. A massive shadow sprawled across the asphalt. My foot slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, the car shuddered, and I gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white. The shape didn't move. For one heartbeat, I thought it was a fallen tree. Then the fog shifted, and the light revealed fur. Thick, dark, matted with something wet. My breath hitched in my throat. It was a wolf dot at least. That's what I told myself. Except wolves weren't supposed to be here. Not in this part of the country, not roaming alone, not this large. Caution should have told me to keep driving, to call someone when I reached town. But the nurse in me, the woman who couldn't walk away from pain-overpowered reason. I pulled over, engine still running, headlights bathing the road in white glare. The wolf lay on its side, its chest rising shallowly. Blood streaked its fur, dark against the pale asphalt. My legs trembled as I stepped out of the car, the cold night air rushing against my face. Every instinct screamed danger, but another voice whispered louder, "Help him." I crept closer, my shoes crunching gravel, my breath fogging in front of me. The closer I came, the bigger he seemed. His shoulders were massive, his body longer than any wild animal I had ever seen. The scent of blood mingled with pine and earth, sharp enough to sting my nostrils. I knelt beside him, my heart hammering. "It's okay," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to calm him or myself. My hands hovered above his wounds, and that's when his eyes opened. Golden, luminous, piercing straight through me. I froze. The world held its breath. For a single instant I swore I saw something human flicker in his gaze. Not the wild ferocity of an animal fighting to live, but the raw, desperate sorrow of a soul on the edge of breaking. I should have run. I should have left him to fate. Instead, I pulled my coat from my shoulders and draped it gently over him, whispering, "You're not alone." The wolf didn't move. His chest rose once, then again, shallow but steady. And in that fragile silence, a strange certainty unfurled inside me, that this was no accident, no random encounter. It felt like a meeting written long before this night, as though fate itself had been waiting in the fog, steering me here. The wind hissed through the trees, carrying with it a sound that made my blood run cold. A howl, low, distant, answered by another closer. The hair on my arms stood on end. I lifted my head, scanning the darkness. Between the trees, shadows shifted too fast, too deliberate to be deer this time. The wolf's eyes found mine again, blazing like embers. And though no words passed his lips, a shiver ran down my spine because I knew what they were saying. Run. But I didn't run. I stayed. And in that choice, I sealed my fate. I didn't sleep that night. After dragging the wolf into my car and act, I still couldn't believe I'd done. I drove home on autopilot. My small cottage sat on the edge of town, hugged by trees that had always felt comforting. That night, they loomed like silent sentinels, watching, waiting. I spread blankets on the living room floor and laid him down. His weight had been staggering, but adrenaline carried me. The moment I stepped back, though, fear began to seep in. I locked the front door, shut the curtains, and checked twice that the windows were latched. Yet even wrapped in layers of fabric and wood, I felt exposed, as though the night itself had followed us inside. I tried to convince myself I was being ridiculous. It was just an animal, injured, helpless, that was all. But when I knelt to clean the blood from his fur, those eyes opened again. Golden, watching, silent, and something inside me shifted. The next morning, I almost convinced myself it had been a dream. Sunlight painted warm squares across the floor, and the air smelled faintly of coffee. Normal, ordinary. But then, I stepped into the living room. The wolf was still there, alive, breathing, watching me. His chest rose and fell steadily now, less shallow than before. The worst of the bleeding had stopped where I'd dressed his wounds. Relief washed through me, quickly followed by dread. What was I doing? Wolves weren't pets. They weren't meant to lie across someone's floor like an oversized dog. I called in sick at work, though my voice shook as I lied to my supervisor about having a fever. It wasn't like me. I never missed a shift. But I couldn't leave him alone. Not yet. As the day wore on, I began to notice things. Small, strange details I couldn't explain. The clocks ticked louder than usual, each second dragging like a hammer on my skull. The air in the house felt heavier, pressing against my skin. Shadows stretched too far across the walls, even though the lamps were on. And every time I turned away from the wolf, I swore I heard whispers. Not words exactly, more like a low murmur, curling through the air just outside the edge of understanding. At first, I thought it was the radio left on in the kitchen. But when I went to check, the silence was absolute. It wasn't silence, though. It was listening. By evening, the unease had rooted deep inside me. I moved through my own house like a guest, jumping at the creak of the floorboards, startled by the wind rattling against the glass. When I sat across from him with a cup of tea clutched between my hands, I caught myself speaking to him softly. "You're safe here. Just heal. Then I'll figure out what to do with you." The wolf's ears twitched, his gaze locking on mine. Too intent, too knowing. The tea grew cold in my hands. That night, the dreams returned. I was running through the forest, branches tearing at my skin, the ground shifting beneath my feet. Behind me, snarls echoed like thunder. I stumbled, fell, and when I looked up, golden eyes glowed in the darkness. I woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, the sheets tangled around me. But it wasn't just the dream that jolted me awake. There had been a sound, a groan, low, Human. I froze, listening. The house was still. My pulse hammered as I slipped from the bed and crept toward the living room. The blankets where I'd left the wolf rustled. I reached for the light switch, but my hand stalled in the air. Some instinct warned me don't. Instead, I stood in the doorway, heart racing, watching the shape beneath the blankets shift slightly. As they caught between forms, my throat dried. I whispered into the dark, "What are you?" No answer came, only silence. And yet, somehow I knew he had heard me. The following day, the unease sharpened into something heavier. The world outside seemed wrong. When I stepped onto the porch to fetch the mail, the air hit me like ice. It was colder than it should have been, considering the season. The woods that bordered my house stood unnaturally still, not a single leaf stirring. Not a bird calling, and then movement between the trees. A figure. Too far to see clearly, but tall. Still. Watching. I blinked and it was gone. My pulse raced as I stumbled back inside, slamming the door. I pressed my back against it, breathing hard, whispering to myself that it was nothing. Just my imagination. Just exhaustion, but deep down, I didn't believe that. The forest welcomed me like a dark cradle. Mist curled around the tree trunks, roots twisting through the earth like veins of some sleeping giant. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. A perfect mirror of my life. Alluring yet dangerous. Familiar yet foreign. I sank to the base of an ancient oak. Knees drawn to my chest, my hands trembling as I tried to catch my breath. Despair threatened to overtake me, the crushing weight of fear, betrayal and isolation pressing relentlessly. Could I even trust myself anymore? Could I trust the instincts that had led me here? Could I trust the pull I still felt toward Adrian? Toward the impossible connection that had both saved me and shattered me? A rustle in the leaves made me stiffen. I spun, eyes wide, searching the shadows. But it wasn't a hunter, not yet. Just a fox, small and silent, staring at me with curious amber eyes before disappearing into the fog. Still, the reminder was clear. The forest was alive, watching, waiting, and so were my enemies. I remembered the note from before, the one slipped under my door, the words etched into my mind. You can't escape your blood. Could I? Could I escape? Or was I trapped, bound to this hidden, dangerous world I hadn't asked to be part of? The thought pressed down like a stone, making me shiver. I thought of Adrian, the half-truths, the moments of tenderness, the golden eyes I couldn't forget, and I realized something terrifying. Even if I survived the hunters, even if I outran the shadows, I couldn't outrun him, or the pull he had on me. Hours passed in a blur. The forest grew darker, deeper, until it felt like the world had folded in on itself. My stomach ached from hunger. My body trembled from cold, and yet the fear did not abate. It coiled in my chest, sharp and relentless, whispering that I would fail, that I would be captured, that I would be alone forever. And then a faint glimmer. Something wedged between the roots of a twisted, old tree, a small object wrapped in cloth. I picked it up with trembling fingers. Inside was a pendant, delicate and golden, shaped like a wolf's head. I had never seen it before, but something about it made my chest tighten, a familiarity I couldn't explain, a promise I couldn't name. Attached was a note, written in a careful hand. Trust the blood that cools. The path is not lost. My hands shook as I held the pendant, heart hammering with a mix of fear and hope. The words were cryptic. Yes, but they were a sign that I was not entirely abandoned, that the darkness surrounding me was not absolute. And yet the question remained. Could I follow it? Could I step into the unknown, trusting instincts and fate, when every fiber of my being screamed to hide, to surrender to fear. The hunters could still be close. Adrian could still be waiting or angry, hurt or distant, his golden eyes burning with questions and frustration. But the pendant pulsed faintly against my palm, as if alive, as if reminding me that the bloodline, the inheritance I had fled from, denied and feared, was not just a curse. It was a guide, a path forward. I rose slowly, determination shaking in my bones, mist curling around my feet. For the first time in what felt like days, I felt a glimmer of agency. I didn't know where this path would lead. I didn't know what dangers awaited. I didn't know if I would survive the night, or the next, or the confrontation that loomed inevitably with Adrian, with my bloodline, with the hunters. But I knew this. I couldn't stay paralyzed in fear. I couldn't let despair claim me. Somewhere in the shadows, in the whispers of the forest, there was truth, and I would find it, even if it meant stepping fully into the abyss. With a deep, shivering breath, I clutched the pendant, feeling the faint warmth against my palm. A spark of hope, or perhaps a warning, pulled me forward into the mist, every step heavy with uncertainty, every heartbeat echoing the question that now dominated my mind. Would I survive the darkness, or would the abyss swallow me whole? And more importantly, would I find Adrian waiting on the other side, or would he be another shadow I could no longer reach? The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of mist and twisted roots. My legs ached, muscles trembling from days of running and hiding, yet something compelled me forward. I clutched the pendant tight, its faint warmth a constant reminder that I was not entirely alone. And then, just beyond a curve in the path, I saw him. Adrian. He stood half hidden in the shadows, his golden eyes glowing softly in the dim light. His body was tense, every muscle coiled like a spring, and yet there was something about him, something familiar, something dangerous, something achingly magnetic that drew me in despite the caution screaming in my chest. I froze. Adrian. My voice was barely a whisper, and even as I said it, I wondered if it would reach him. He tilted his head, lips parting slightly, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't be here," he said, low and controlled, but I could hear the strain beneath the words. "It's not safe. I'm not hiding anymore," I said, stepping closer, though every instinct told me to stop. "I'm done running, and I need to see you." His gaze softened, just slightly, and I saw it, the conflict, the war between restraint and desire, between anger and relief. "You shouldn't trust me," he said quietly. "Not yet. Not after everything." "I know," I admitted, heart pounding. "I know I can't fully trust you. But I can't stay away." The tension between us was like a living thing, pressing in from every side. The danger that had stalked me for days seemed to fade, replaced by the storm of emotions swirling between us. Fear, longing, anger, relief all coalesced into a heat I could not deny. Adrian stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle shift of his form hinting at the wolf beneath the man. My pulse quickened. "You shouldn't feel this," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "Not now. Not here. It's too dangerous." "And yet I do," I whispered, stepping even closer. "And I think you do too." His golden eyes searched mine, intense and unyielding. I saw the truth there, desire, care, and the ache of our shared past. But I also saw something else, guilt, the weight of secrets, and the fear that our bond might fracture again if we weren't careful. For a moment, we simply stood there, letting the silence stretch between us. The mist curled around our legs, the faint sounds of the forest a distant hum, and I realized how much I had missed him, Not just the danger and intensity, but the man, the wolf, the protector I had come to need. Then, without warning, he reached for my hand. Tentative at first, then firmer as I allowed him to hold it. The touch sent a jolt of warmth up my arm, igniting the pull that had been simmering between us since the warehouse. "You've been through so much," he said quietly, eyes never leaving mine. "And I failed you in ways I can't even explain. But I'm here. I won't leave you again." I swallowed, feeling tears sting my eyes. I don't know if I can forgive everything. Not yet. But I can't deny what I feel. The space between us seemed impossibly small, charged with the unspoken truth. Our connection was undeniable, magnetic, dangerous and yet impossible to ignore. A sudden rustle in the underbrush snapped us back to reality. We weren't alone. The hunters, the shadows that had haunted me for days, were still out there, waiting, circling, watching. Adrian's posture stiffened instantly, protective and alert. "We don't have time," he said, voice sharp. "But—" he hesitated, gaze locking with mine. "I need you to know something." I nodded, heart hammering. "Anything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "I made mistakes. I didn't tell you everything. I hid truths because I wanted to protect you. But the moment I let fear rule my decisions, I put you in danger. And I can't. I won't let that happen again." I felt the pull of his words, the weight of sincerity in every syllable. And though mistrust still lingered, I could see the truth in him, truth wrapped in danger, in instinct, in a bond neither of us could deny. We moved deeper into the forest, staying low, avoiding the eyes that might be watching. Each step was careful, deliberate, yet every glance between us, every touch of hand to hand, was laden with unspoken promises. Finally, we stopped at a small clearing, a rare patch of moonlight cutting through the mist. I looked at him, searching his face, reading the lines of worry, tension, and longing. "I don't know what comes next," I admitted, voice soft, trembling. "The hunters, the bloodline, everything." Adrian's gaze softened, and he cupped my face gently, thumb brushing against my cheek. "Then we make a choice," he said firmly. "We face it together or not at all." The words struck something deep in me. A vow, a pact, a promise not just of survival, but of trust, of connection, of the impossible bond between human and wolf, between protector and mate. I hesitated, feeling the weight of every danger, every secret, every fear. "I choose to face it with you." He nodded, pressing his forehead to mine, the golden glow of his eyes softening into warmth. "Then we move forward, together. No secrets we can't face. No threat we can't endure." The pull between us flared again, magnetic and undeniable. It was no longer just desire, it was necessity, survival, and the acknowledgement that neither of us could go back to the way things were. In that moment, the forest felt both vast and intimate, dangerous and safe, chaotic and still. The hunters could be anywhere. The shadows could strike at any second, and the path ahead was uncertain and perilous. But for the first time in days, I felt hope. And though fear still lurked at the edges of our reunion, I knew one thing: we would face the darkness together. And whatever came next, whatever trials or secrets awaited, we had made a pact, a vow written in trust blood. And the undeniable pull between us and that vow, fragile and fierce, was stronger than fear. The forest was silent, almost unnervingly so. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something inevitable. Adrian and I moved cautiously, our steps synchronized, bodies tense, senses on high alert. Every shadow could conceal a hunter, Every rustle could signal danger. But this time, I didn't feel entirely helpless. The pendant pressed against my chest, a faint warmth reminding me of the path I had chosen, the pact we had made. Together, we had faced fear, danger, and mistrust. Together, we had survived. And now, together, we would face the final hunt. We reached a clearing where the moonlight pierced the canopy, casting silver patterns on the forest floor. There, standing like a spectre from a nightmare, was him, the ultimate enemy. Tall, imposing, eyes black as obsidian, aura sharp and commanding. Every movement exuded power, control, and malice. The hunters who had chased us were nothing compared to him. This was the one who orchestrated everything. The puppet master behind every threat, every shadow, every moment of fear that had haunted me since the warehouse. Adrian's body shifted subtly, claws flexing, his wolfish aura flaring. He positioned himself between me and the figure, his golden eyes narrowing, muscles taut. "You've come far," the enemy said, voice smooth and icy. "But the hunt ends tonight." My stomach churned. The threat was palpable, a weight pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Yet even as fear surged, I felt something else: determination, fueled by the bond I shared with Adrian and the truth I had yet to uncover about myself. The enemy stepped closer, circling us like a predator testing prey. Every word, every movement was calculated, designed to intimidate. "You have something I want," he said, eyes flicking to me. "Something tied to your bloodline. Something your little wolf cannot protect forever." I clenched the pendant in my hand, the warmth searing through my palm. Adrian's gaze never left me, steady, protective, unwavering. "We'll see about that," he growled, voice deep, resonant, filled with the restrained power of the wolf within. The tension between the three of us was suffocating. I could feel the pull of danger, the magnetic force of Adrian beside me, the shadow of my own destiny calling. And I realized something terrifying and exhilarating. I was not just a pawn. I was part of this battle. My bloodline, my choices, my courage all mattered. Suddenly the enemy lunged, moving faster than human perception could follow. Adrian shifted partially, claws extending, golden eyes blazing as he met the attack head-on. I stumbled back, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to intervene. Yet, I knew my role was different. My strength was not in brute force. It was in understanding, in intuition, in the power I carried silently through my bloodline. And I could feel it stirring, deep within me, as if the pendant itself was awakening something long dormant. The enemy and Adrian collided with a ferocity that shook the clearing. Metal, claws, and supernatural strength clashed in a dazzling, terrifying display. I watched, both terrified and mesmerized, my chest tight with fear and longing, as the man I loved fought not just for survival, but for me, for us. Then the enemy spoke, voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "She belongs to the bloodline. You cannot protect her forever, Wolf. And tonight you will learn the truth about destiny." My heart skipped. Destiny. Bloodline. I felt the weight of it pressing down, yet a strange clarity came over me. I would not run. I would not hide. I would face whatever trial awaited, because this was my path, my choice, my fight as much as Adrian's. Adrian faltered for the briefest moment, just long enough for the enemy to strike. He twisted, shifting partially, letting the wolf within surge, claws raking the earth, golden eyes burning brighter than ever. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Our bond, forged in fear, mistrust, and passion, was not just emotional, it was survival. It was power. and it would guide us through the coming storm. The enemy's next move was deliberate, precise, a challenge and a threat. The clearing seemed to shrink as he advanced, every shadow bending toward him, every sound muted except the pounding of my heart. I stepped forward, pendant glowing faintly in my hand, and felt a surge of strength and clarity. This was it. The final hunt. The ultimate test. Adrian turned, gaze locking with mine, eyes fierce yet tender. "Whatever comes," he said, voice low and steady, "we face it together. No lies, no hesitation, no surrender." I nodded, feeling courage anchor my fear. Together. The enemy smirked as if aware of our pact but undeterred. "Then step into the abyss. Let the hunt begin." I took a deep breath, gripping the pendant. Every nerve in my body screamed, every instinct flared, and yet I felt ready for the first time. Truly ready. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath. The final trial awaited. The ultimate battle, the test of love, loyalty and destiny was here, and I stepped forward, into the shadows, into the unknown, into the heart of the hunt, with Adrian at my side, and the bond between us burning brighter than fear. No matter what came next, I would face it. Because running was no longer an option, because destiny had called, because the hunt had begun, and this time, I was ready. The clearing seemed suspended in time. Mist clung to the ground, the moonlight slicing through the branches, casting silver patterns that flickered across the combatants. Every breath felt heavy, every heartbeat amplified in my chest. This was it, the edge of destiny. Adrian and I faced the enemy together. Yet for the first time, I realized the full weight of my own role. I was not just a bystander. I was part of the bloodline, part of the fight, part of the outcome. And the thought both terrified and emboldened me. The enemy's eyes, lacquer's void, fixed on me, measuring, calculating. "You cannot hide behind him forever," he hissed. "Your blood, your power, belongs to me." I felt a jolt of fear, the weight of generations pressing down. But beneath it, something stirred, something ancient, something fierce, something that had waited for me to step into my own strength. The pendant against my chest glowed faintly, a warmth that spread through my veins. I inhaled, steadying myself, feeling the bond with Adrian pulse through me like fire and iron. The battle began in a blur. Adrian shifted partially, claws flashing, a golden storm of power, while I stayed slightly back, observing, calculating, preparing. The enemy moved with inhuman speed, striking at both of us. His blows precise, deadly, designed to test every weakness. I ducked as a shadowed strike came for my head, rolling across the damp ground. The pendant pulsed again, and I realized I could channel it, not just as a talisman, but as a conduit for the strength of my lineage. Closing my eyes, I focused on the warmth spreading through me, letting it flow into my limbs, my hands, my heartbeat. When I opened them, the world seemed sharper, brighter, clearer. Fear was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I rose to my feet. Adrian's golden eyes met mine, a silent understanding passing between us. No words, no hesitation. Just trust, hard-won and fierce. The enemy lunged again, and this time I met the strike. Not with strength of muscle, but with power of bloodline. A pulse of energy radiated from me, throwing him off balance. He stumbled, surprised for the first time in the battle. Adrian took the opportunity, claws extended, speed unmatched, to strike at a vital point. The enemy countered, a roar tearing from his throat. But the coordination, the bond we shared gave us the edge. We fought not just with strength, but with connection, with instinct, with something primal that bound us together. Every clash, every dodge, every strike was a dance of survival and desire. Then it happened. The moment that fractured the air with tension. The enemy reached for me directly, eyes burning with intent, and I saw my greatest fear reflected in his gaze. Losing control, failing Adrian, losing everything to the darkness he represented. Adrian's growl tore through the clearing. "No!" he shouted, and in a blur of golden fury, he threw himself between us. The enemy struck Adrian, sending him crashing into the underbrush. Pain ripped through me as I saw him fall, every instinct screaming to rush to him. Yet knowing that the enemy would exploit my panic, I took a deep breath, centering myself, letting the pendant's warmth fill me entirely. This was my moment, not just to fight, but to act, to choose, to claim the power I had denied myself. With a surge, I channeled every ounce of strength, every pulse of the bloodline's legacy into a single strike. Light flared from my hands, connecting with the enemy, throwing him backward into the mist. He roared, fury and disbelief mixing, and I felt the strain of every sacrifice, every fear, every moment of doubt crystallize into one sharp clarity. I would not falter. Adrian staggered to his feet, golden eyes blazing, voice ragged. "Are you?" "Yes," I panted, chest heaving, hands trembling, together. The enemy rose again, slow, deliberate, testing us, circling like a predator unwilling to concede. But the bond between Adrian and me, our trust, and the power I had embraced, had shifted the balance. With coordinated effort we struck again, a seamless combination of his strength and my awakened power. The final clash sent the enemy reeling, disoriented, struggling to maintain the control he had wielded for generations. And then, with one final surge, a choice I had known I would face, I unleashed the full extent of my strength, a wave of power that connected bloodline, heart, and bond into one decisive strike. The enemy fell, crashing to the ground, defeated but alive, silenced by the realization that he had underestimated the force of unity, trust, and legacy. The clearing was quiet again, save for our ragged breaths and the faint rustle of leaves. Moonlight filtered through, touching our soaked, bruised forms. Adrian collapsed to one knee, golden eyes softening as he reached for me. "You!" he started, but I cut him off, shaking my head, laughing with relief and disbelief. "We did it," I whispered, voice shaking. "We survived." He lifted me into his arms, holding me close, and for the first time, the fear that had shadowed us both seemed to melt, leaving only the warmth of our bond, the strength of our connection, and the ache of what we had endured together. I pressed my forehead to his, letting the storm outside fade into memory. "Whatever comes next," I said softly, "we face it together." Adrian nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Always." The enemy was gone, or at least neutralized for now. The forest seemed to exhale, shadows retreating as if acknowledging the shift in power. And though my body ached, bruised and exhausted, and though the scars of fear and mistrust would remain, something profound had changed. I had faced my greatest fear, embraced my bloodline, and made the painful choice to wield my power not for vengeance, but for survival, love, and destiny. And as I looked into Adrian's golden eyes, I knew one thing with unshakable certainty. The battle was over, but our journey, our story was only beginning. The first light of dawn broke over the forest, soft and pale, casting a gentle glow across the aftermath of the night's chaos. The mist lingered, curling like ghostly fingers through the trees, but the air no longer felt heavy with danger. I stood at the edge of the clearing, the pendant around my neck cool against my skin. Its warmth from yesterday's battle now a faint echo. My body was bruised, sore, and exhausted, but my heart was alive in a way it had never been before. Adrian stepped up beside me, careful, measured, as if testing whether the world would allow peace to settle over us. His golden eyes, now softened by fatigue and relief, met mine, and in that gaze, I saw everything the storm we had endured, the danger we had faced, the bond that had deepened beyond fear, mistrust, or circumstance. The forest seemed to breathe with us, exhaling the tension, the fear, the desperation that had shadowed our lives. I thought of the hunters, of the enemy who had orchestrated our trials, and of the countless moments when I had felt powerless. And yet, here I stood, having embraced my own strength, having chosen trust over fear, love over isolation. I never thought we'd make it through, I admitted. Voice quiet, almost lost in the whisper of the wind. Adrian's hand found mine, warm and grounding. Neither did I, he said, voice low, intimate. But we did. Against every shadow, every lie, every danger. We survived, together. I squeezed his hand, feeling the pulse of connection that had grown from tentative sparks to an unbreakable bond. The attraction, the trust, the love, it was no longer just desire. It was something deeper, something eternal. We walked through the forest in silence, not because words were unnecessary, but because words could not capture the intensity of what we had endured. Every step was a testament to survival, to courage, to the choices that had shaped us. At the clearing where the final battle had raged, I paused. The earth was scarred, the mist curling around broken branches and trampled leaves. I knelt, letting my hands brush the ground, feeling the lingering energy of the fight, the echo of power, fear, and determination. It's strange, I said softly, almost to myself, to think that something so terrifying could bring so much clarity, so much purpose. Adrian crouched beside me, his gaze distant for a moment, then returned to mine. We've changed, he said, forever, and yet I wouldn't trade it. Not even the pain, not even the fear, because it brought me to you. I looked up at him, feeling the weight of his words, the truth of them sinking into my chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. Every bruise, every scar, every moment of doubt and danger had led to this, the culmination of our trials, the forging of our bond. I thought of the sacrifices, of the choices that had nearly torn us apart, of the fear I had felt when Adrian faltered in the warehouse, when mistrust had shadowed our connection, of the enemy who had sought to manipulate me, to weaponize my bloodline, to shatter us. And I realized, with a clarity that made my chest ache, that we had survived not because of luck, not because of strength alone, but because we had chosen each other again and again. In every whispered fear and every desperate heartbeat. We're okay now, I whispered, leaning into him. I think we really are. Adrian's lips brushed my forehead, a tender, grounding touch. We are, and we always will be, as long as we remember what brought us here, and what we fought to protect. The sun rose higher, scattering the mist and painting the forest in hues of gold and green. The danger that had stalked us seemed distant, almost like a dream we had survived. Yet the memories lingered, faint as the echo of a wolf's howl in the far distance. I took a deep breath, letting the peace of the morning fill me. And I knew, without doubt, that I had been transformed, not just by the fight, but by the bond I had forged with Adrian, by the strength I had discovered in myself, and by the realization that destiny was not a path chosen for us, but one we claimed with every heartbeat and every choice. Adrian's hand tightened around mine. No matter what comes next, he said, voice steady, unwavering. We face it together. Always. I nodded, feeling the full weight of that promise, the enduring truth of our connection. Always, I echoed. The forest was alive with whispers now, softer, gentler echoes of what had been, and what would continue. Birds began their morning songs, leaves rustled in the gentle breeze. And for the first time since this journey began, the world felt alive, safe, an hour's dot, and yet, as I looked out into the horizon, I could feel it, the lingering pull of the supernatural, the bloodline that would always be part of me, the unseen threats that might one day rise again. The world was not entirely free of danger, but it had shifted. We had shifted. I pressed the pendant to my chest, feeling the warmth as a reminder, a guide, a bond, a legacy that would continue to echo through every choice I made. And beside me, Adrian stood, a constant, a protector, a mate whose presence anchored me even in the unknown. We've survived everything, I whispered, leaning my head against his shoulder. And I think we found each other in the ashes. Adrian's lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile. In the ashes. And in the dawn. The sun rose fully, golden light spilling across the clearing, illuminating scars, triumphs, and the enduring connection between human and wolf, love and destiny, fear and courage. And as we stood there, hand in hand, I realized that some bonds are eternal, etched in blood, forged in trials and echoing forever, even through the shadows. The battle was over, but the story, the love, the strength, the destiny would linger, haunting, powerful, unforgettable. In the end, I was no longer just a nurse who saved a wounded wolf. I was a survivor, a protector, a mate, and forever changed. And the echoes of that night, of the choices we made, of the bond we claimed, would resonate eternally. I thought about calling someone. The police, maybe. A wildlife officer. But what would I say? That I had dragged a wolf into my living room, and now strange men were staring at me from the woods. They would laugh, or worse, take him away. And for reasons I couldn't explain, that thought made panic rise in my throat. It was absurd. He was dangerous, wild. I should want him gone. But I didn't deed instead. I went back to the living room and sat cross-legged on the floor beside him. My fingers itched to reach out, to trace the strange markings I now noticed beneath the fur scars, long and deliberate, not from any ordinary animal fight. My breath caught as I whispered, "Who did this to you?" The wolf's eyes slid open, golden and unblinking. For one heartbeat, I swore I saw understanding flash there. Something that sent chills racing across my skin. The unease I had been fighting all day rose higher, coiling around my chest like chains. Something was happening. Something I couldn't explain. And I was already in too deep to walk away. The third day was when the whispers stopped being confined to dreams. I woke with the taste of copper on my tongue, as though I'd bitten it in my sleep. The morning light spilled weakly through the curtains, pale and sickly. I staggered into the kitchen, made coffee with shaking hands, and tried to cling to normalcy. But normalcy felt brittle now, like glass already cracked. The wolf lay in the same place, his chest rising steadily, wounds closing faster than I'd expected. Too fast. The bandages I'd applied the night before were already loose, the flesh beneath knitting together in ways I couldn't explain. I told myself I was imagining it, that my tired eyes were playing tricks. But then the phone rang. I jumped so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Snatching the receiver, I pressed it to my ear. "Hello?" Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper. A voice I didn't recognize, low and urgent. "He is not what you think. Leave before it's too late." My throat closed. Who is this? But the line clicked dead. I stood frozen in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My hand trembled as I set it down. I told myself it was a prank call, a wrong number. But the words burrowed deep, sharp as glass. He is not what you think. I needed air. I pulled on my coat and stepped outside. The forest loomed close, silent and watchful. The kind of silence that prickled at the edges of hearing, making you certain something waited just out of sight. As I walked toward the mailbox at the end of the gravel drive, I caught movement from the corner of my eye. A crow, perched on the fence post. It cocked its head, black eyes glinting, feathers ruffling as though in agitation. "Shoo," I whispered. Waving a hand, it didn't move. Instead, it let out a harsh call that echoed through the trees, sharp enough to make me flinch. The sound carried too far, bouncing between trunks, lingering unnaturally long. My skin crawled. When I reached the mailbox, there was only one envelope inside. No stamp, no return address. My name scrawled across the front in a hurried hand. I glanced around. No one on the road, no footsteps in the gravel, no car pulling away. The crow gave another grating cry. Back inside, I stared at the envelope for what felt like hours before tearing it open. Inside was a single scrap of paper. One word written in thick black ink: run. The unease I'd been trying to smother bloomed into full fear. My hands shook as I clutched the note. Someone new. About him. About me. I spun toward the living room. The wolf hadn't moved. His eyes were shut, chest steady. But when I stepped closer, his ears twitched. His body tensed, as though he knew something had been delivered. "Who are you?" I whispered, voice cracking. No answer. Only the rise and fall of his breathing. That afternoon, I forced myself into town. I told myself it was to pick up more medical supplies. But in truth, I just needed to feel the world outside my house was still normal. Still safe. The grocery store smelled of coffee and detergent. Ordinary people moved up and down the aisles, filling carts, chatting idly. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me. Every sound seemed too loud, every face too sharp. At the checkout, Mrs. Harris, an older woman I'd treated once in the year, leaned closer as she scanned my items. Her voice dropped low. "You be careful up there, dear." I blinked. Careful? Her wrinkled hand paused on the scanner. Her eyes, usually warm, flicked toward the doors as though afraid someone might overhear. The woods have been strange lately. Animals going missing. Tracks too large for any bear. People hearing howls at night. She hesitated, then added, almost a whisper, "Some things are best left alone." A chill rippled down my spine. I forced a smile, muttered a thank you, and hurried out. Driving home, the road felt narrower than ever, the trees pressing closer. I kept replaying the whispered call. The crow. The note, Mrs. Harris's warning. One coincidence could be ignored. Two, maybe. But all of them together. My grip on the wheel tightened as a question rose, unbidden. Had I brought something into my home I couldn't control? When I pulled into the driveway, the air was heavy again. I unlocked the door, heart thundering, and stepped inside. The living room was empty. The blankets were rumpled, blood-stained bandages tossed aside. My pulse lurched. "No," I whispered, dropping the groceries. "No, no, no." Then I heard it. Not a snarl. Not an animal's growl. A man's cough. Low. Pained. From the shadows at the far end of the hall, my body went cold. The note still crumpled in my pocket. Suspicion was no longer a whisper. It was a storm, and I was standing in the center of it. The cough echoed again, rough and jagged. breaking the silence of my home like a blade through cloth. I stood frozen in the entryway, my pulse hammering against my ribs. My mind screamed run, but my feet carried me forward, step by step down the hallway. The groceries lay abandoned by the door, forgotten. "Hello?" My voice was a whisper, too thin, too shaky. Silence answered. I forced myself closer, the hall stretching longer with each step, shadows bleeding across the floor. At the end of the hall, near the guest room door, I saw it movement. A figure. Not the wolf. Too tall. Too human. For a heartbeat. I couldn't breathe. My body swayed between disbelief and terror, every instinct telling me this wasn't possible. I had left a wounded animal in my living room, and now a man stood in my hallway, half hidden by shadow. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. The figure didn't move, didn't answer, but I felt it, the weight of his gaze pressing against me, sharp and consuming. I couldn't see his face clearly, only the outline of broad shoulders, the curve of a chest rising unevenly, the faint gleam of eyes catching what little light filtered through the curtains. Golden. Recognition struck me like lightning. The same eyes that had stared at me from the wolf's face. My knees weakened. My fingers dug into the wall for balance. No, that's not possible. The figure shifted, stepping slightly into the light. Enough for me to glimpse torn fabric clinging to his body, scars running like pale lines across his skin. His hair hung dark and disheveled, brushing his jaw. He leaned against the doorframe, unsteady but unmistakably alive. And unmistakably not the wolf I had dragged inside. "You," my throat tightened. The note in my pocket burned like fire. The phone call, the crow, Mrs. Harris's warning. All of it crashed over me. "What are you?" The man said nothing, just watched me, eyes never leaving mine, something unreadable burning within them. I took a step back, breath shuddering. My body screamed to bolt, yet some deeper pull rooted me in place. The air between us felt charged, as if invisible threads stretched from him to me, binding me there. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, hoarse, yet steady enough to freeze me in place. "You saved me." The words should have reassured me. They didn't. They terrified me. I stumbled backward into the living room, fumbling for my phone. My fingers trembled as I pressed the screen. But before I could dial, the device slipped from my slick hands and clattered against the hardwood floor. When I looked up, the hallway was empty. Gone. I blinked, chest heaving, scanning every shadow. No sound of footsteps, no door opening, no broken window. Just silence, thick and suffocating. Had I imagined him? Was exhaustion blurring reality so badly I was seeing things? I rushed to the guest room. Empty. Back to the hallway. Empty. I searched every corner, every door, every space where a person could hide. Nothing. But when I returned to the living room, my eyes fell on the blankets where the wolf had been. They were empty, and on the hardwood floor beside them, faint smears of blood trailed toward the hallway. That night, I barely slept. I locked every door, checked every window twice. Yet even in my bedroom, under the covers with the lamp burning bright, I couldn't shake the memory of those eyes watching me from the dark. Golden. Human. Wolf. Dreams came again, but sharper, clearer. I saw the man standing at the edge of the forest, half shrouded in mist. He lifted a hand toward me as if to call me closer. His lips moved, but no sound came. When I woke, I swore I still felt the heat of his gaze lingering on my skin. The next morning, I convinced myself I had imagined it. The mind can play cruel tricks when pushed beyond exhaustion. That was all. But when I stepped outside to fetch the morning paper, I saw them. Footprints. Not paw prints. Bare feet. Large, pressed deep into the damp earth, leading from the porch steps into the woods. I crouched, fingers trembling as I traced the outline of one print. Too big to be mine, too fresh to be old. My breath hitched as I straightened, staring into the tree line where the trail vanished. A shadow flickered there, quick, deliberate dot, and for the briefest moment, I saw him, the man, standing between the trees, half concealed by fog, watching me. Our eyes locked across the distance. Something in my chest pulled tight, magnetic, aching, as if an invisible thread tied me to him. It wasn't fear, not entirely. It was something heavier, deeper, more dangerous. I blinked. He was gone. The woods stood empty once more, silent and watchful. All day, unease coiled inside me like smoke. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't eat. Every sound made me flinch: the creak of the house, the rush of wind against the windows. And always I felt it. The sense of being observed. In the late afternoon, I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the tree line. My reflection shimmered faintly against the glass, pale and restless. But just behind it, deeper in the shadows, movement stirred. The man. Again. Still. Always there. Not approaching. Not vanishing. Just watching. I gripped the edge of the sink until my knuckles ached. My heart pounded with a strange rhythm, not only fear, but something perilously close to curiosity. Who was he? What was he? And why, despite every warning I'd received, did part of me want to step into those woods and find out? That night, as I closed the curtains against the dark, I whispered to myself, "Stay away." But even as I said it, I knew the truth. I didn't want him to. The forest was too quiet. I had walked further than I meant to, following the faint trail of bare footprints that pressed into the earth. Part of me told myself I was searching for answers, proof that I hadn't imagined him. But the other part knew I was being pulled like a moth to flame, against reason, against every warning. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of pine and rain-soaked earth. My breath came sharp and uneven, the silence pressing harder with every step. No birds, no wind, only my heartbeat pounding too loud in my ears. And then I felt it. That weight again. The unmistakable sense of being watched. I froze, my eyes sweeping the tree line. Nothing but shadows. Nothing but mist curling low to the ground. "Why are you following me?" The voice came from behind me, deep, rough, and too close. I spun, breath catching. He was there. The man, no longer a flicker in the distance, no longer a shadow at the edge of my vision. He stood only a few paces away, half in shadow, half in light. His body looked strong but strained, as though every muscle carried a secret wound. His shirt hung torn, darkened with old stains. His hair fell in wild waves to his jaw. And his eyes, those golden, inhuman eyes, glowed faintly in the dimness, watching me with an intensity that made my knees weaken. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink until it was only us, me and him. Breath and silence, fear and fascination. I swallowed hard, words tangling on my tongue. I wasn't following you. His gaze sharpened. Then why are you here? The truth stuck in my throat, too dangerous to admit. That I had followed, that some thread had pulled me closer, no matter how much my mind screamed to turn back. Instead, I whispered, "Because you were in my house." He tilted his head slightly, studying me like I was some puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You brought me there." The way he said it, low, certain, almost accusing, sent a chill racing over my skin. I hugged my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how fragile I looked standing there in the woods. "You were a wolf." And then, my voice faltered. "You weren't." His lips curved, not into a smile, but something sharper. A knowing, dangerous edge. And yet you didn't run. I should have. God help me, I should have. But as I met his eyes, I couldn't look away. There was something magnetic in them, something ancient and untamed. Every instinct screamed danger, but something deeper whispered stay. I don't even know what you are, I said, though it came out softer than I meant, almost like a plea. For the first time, his expression flickered. Something shadowed his face pain, maybe, or regret. His jaw tightened as if holding back words. Then he stepped closer, not much. Just enough to make the space between us vanish. Just enough for me to catch the heat radiating off him. The faint smell of smoke and earth clinging to his skin. My breath caught. You don't want to know, he said, voice rough as gravel. Not really. But I did. Every cell in my body screamed that I did. Even as my heart raced with fear, even as my mind begged me to back away. There was a pull so fierce I could hardly breathe. You're wrong, I whispered. For a long moment, we stood there, the silence thick, the air charged. His gaze traced my face as if memorizing it, lingering on my lips before snapping back to my eyes. And God help me, I felt it, an invisible thread tugging tighter, drawing me toward him. His hand lifted, almost against his will. Fingers stopped just short of my cheek, trembling faintly as if he fought himself. The space between his skin and mine burned hotter than fire. But then, with a sharp breath, he dropped his hand and turned away. Shoulders rigid. You should stay away from me, he muttered. Voice breaking at the edges. The sudden distance stung more than it should have. My heart twisted painfully, as though I'd been denied something I didn't even understand. I took a step after him. Wait. He stilled. Didn't look back. Why? I asked. My voice shook. Why should I? Slowly, he turned his head just enough that I caught the outline of his face, the glint of his eyes burning through the mist. Because I'm not what you think I am. Before I could answer, he was gone. One step into the shadows and the forest seemed to swallow him whole, leaving nothing but silence and the echo of his presence. I stumbled home in a daze, every nerve humming, my body still trembling from the nearness of him. I told myself I was afraid, that the unease in my chest was terror, that the shaking in my hands was shock. But when I closed the door behind me and pressed my back against it, I knew the truth. Fear hadn't been the only thing. I felt out there something else had taken root, something far more dangerous. A pull, a hunger, a need I couldn't name. I had looked into the eyes of something inhuman, something I should run from. And instead, I found myself craving more. That night, as I lay awake in the dark, my mind replayed every second of our encounter. The way his voice rasped against my skin. The way his eyes had burned through me. The way I had leaned I had leaned toward him, as though my body already belonged to that pull. I pressed a trembling hand against my chest, trying to steady the storm raging inside me. I don't even know his name, I whispered into the empty room. But names didn't matter, because the truth was already unbearable. I wanted him, and that terrified me more than anything else. I told myself I would forget him. I told myself I would wake the next morning, go to the hospital, and slip back into the rhythm of my ordinary life. But ordinary life was gone. From the moment I saw him, golden eyes burning through the mist, everything shifted, as if my world had tilted and gravity no longer obeyed its own rules. The first sign came in dreams. That night, I fell into sleep like a stone into dark water. At first, there was nothing but silence. Then forest. Thick, endless trees stretching into shadow. I was running barefoot, the earth damp beneath me. And behind me, I heard it. The steady rhythm of paws striking soil. A low growl that vibrated through the marrow of my bones. I turned, and there he was, the wolf. Not broken or bleeding this time, but whole. Magnificent. Golden eyes locking on mine with a hunger that made my breath catch. And then, as I blinked, the wolf wasn't a wolf at all. He stood tall, a man in the clearing, chest heaving, gaze scorching. His lips moved, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. My name. I woke gasping, my sheets tangled around me. The echo of his voice still ringing in my head. The second sign came at the hospital. It was an ordinary shift, filled with the small chaos of emergencies and endless patients. But while I bent over a chart, I felt it again, that weight, the prickle of eyes on me. I glanced up, expecting to find a colleague. Instead, I saw him. Not in the flesh, not standing there, but reflected. In the glass of a supply cabinet, in the gleam of a polished tile. Just for an instant. His shape, his shadow, the wild tilt of his head as though watching me. When I spun, there was nothing. My pulse raced, my hands trembling so badly I almost dropped the chart. "You okay?" one of the nurses asked, giving me a curious look. I nodded too quickly. Just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was haunted. The third sign came when I tried to push it all away. I left the hospital that night, determined to take control of myself again. This wasn't healthy. I was imagining things, feeding my exhaustion with fantasies. I told myself I needed grounding, normalcy. A walk through town, the hum of human voices, the comfort of street lamps. But even there, the world felt wrong. The grocery clerk whispered when I passed, words too low to catch, but eyes darting nervously toward the forest. An old man sitting on a bench muttered something as I walked by, his voice cracked but urgent. Best not to walk alone after dark. They'll smell your kindness. They'll take it from you. I froze, my stomach dropping. Excuse me? But when I turned, his eyes were clouded with age, staring through me as though he'd forgotten I was there. I walked faster after that, but unease followed me home like a second shadow. And then came the accident. It was late, close to midnight, when I parked outside my house. The air was damp again, heavy with fog curling low around the grass. I pulled my bag from the passenger seat, ready to bolt inside and lock the door. But just as I stepped out, a sharp crack split the silence. A branch fell. Not small, not harmless. A thick, jagged limb hurtled from the tree above, crashing down exactly where I had been standing seconds before. I stumbled backward, heart pounding, my bag tumbling to the ground. The branch shattered against the pavement with enough force to leave splinters scattered like daggers. I stood frozen, my breath ragged. That hadn't been chance. It felt deliberate. I wasn't alone. Slowly, I lifted my gaze to the tree line. And there he was. Not hidden this time. Not a shadow. Not a flickering glass. Him. Standing at the edge of the forest, half cloaked in mist, his golden eyes burning even at a distance. The sight hit me like a blow, terror and relief. Fear and longing tangled in one unbearable knot. Why? My voice cracked across the distance, too small against the silence. Why are you here? He didn't answer. He didn't move. But I felt it, an invisible pull, a command written in the air. And for one terrifying heartbeat, I wanted to go to him. My feet shifted forward before reason clawed me back. I gripped the strap of my bag like a lifeline, forcing my body to still. "Leave me alone," I whispered, though my chest ached even as I said it. His head tilted, just enough for me to catch the strange sadness in his face. Then, like mist unraveling, he stepped back into the trees and vanished. I ran inside, slamming the door behind me, my breath ragged. My hands shook so badly it took 3 tries to lock it. My chest heaved, caught between anger, fear, and something far worse, because no matter how much I wanted to push him out of my world, I knew the truth now. Ordinary life was gone. Dreams, warnings, accidents, this wasn't coincidence. My life had collided with something vast and ancient, something that wouldn't let me go, and standing there in the dark, clutching the lock with trembling hands, I finally admitted the one thing I'd been avoiding. I wasn't just afraid of him, was afraid of how much I wanted him. And that desire, I knew, was going to destroy me. I avoided him for 3 days, or at least, I tried to, but no matter how many times I told myself to forget, I couldn't silence the memory of his eyes, the sound of his voice scraping across my skin like gravel and fire. He was in my dreams every night, sometimes wolf, sometimes man, sometimes both. And every morning I woke shaken, more restless than the last by the 3rd night. I gave up pretending. I found myself walking the edge of the forest, the place where I'd last seen him. The mist curled low, and the air was damp enough to cling to my hair. My heart pounded as if I were trespassing, as if some invisible boundary hummed beneath my feet. And then he was there, stepping from the shadows, tall and ragged, his golden eyes locking on mine like he'd been waiting. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low, threaded with restraint. I couldn't stay away, I admitted before I could stop myself. For a long moment, he only stared as though my honesty caught him off guard. Then his lips curved, not into a smile, but something softer, something dangerous. "Neither could I," he murmured. "We talked at first, if you could call it that." Short, guarded words. Him asking why I helped him. Me asking who or what he was. He never gave full answers, but each fragment only drew me closer. "It wasn't just instinct," I said one evening, when we stood at the edge of the clearing, his shadow long in the moonlight. "I didn't help you just because you were hurt. I felt like I had to. Like it was meant." His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. Instead, he turned away, muttering, "Meant doesn't always mean safe." Yet he stayed, and so did I. In the days that followed, our silences grew comfortable, almost fragile. We didn't always need words. Sometimes it was just his hand brushing the bark of a tree, while mine trailed nearby, not quite touching. Sometimes it was the way he watched me with a hunger that wasn't just for flesh, but for something deeper, something neither of us dared name. Once, I caught him standing outside my porch at dawn, half hidden, his figure unmoving. When our eyes met, he vanished into the mist. But I knew he'd been guarding me, and strangely, I wasn't afraid. It was during one of those stolen evenings that I learned his name. "Tell me," I whispered, the night cool against my skin, fireflies glowing like stars between us. "If you want me to trust you, I need to know something real." His gaze lingered on mine, sharp and hesitant, like he was weighing a dangerous choice. Then he exhaled slowly, "Adrian." The word sank into me like a stone in water, heavy and irrevocable. "Adrian," I repeated softly, tasting it, committing it to memory. Something shifted in his eyes then, something raw and unguarded. And though he said nothing more, I knew I had been given something sacred. The bond deepened in ways I didn't want to admit. I caught myself waiting for him, stealing glances toward the forest whenever I was home. At the hospital, I'd imagine him in the quiet corners of the halls, watching. My patients noticed the change, how distracted I seemed, how my thoughts wandered. "You look like someone in love," one of the older nurses teased. I flushed and forced a laugh. Hardly. But inside, I knew the truth. It was something stronger than love, heavier than want. It was need. A dangerous, forbidden tether pulling tighter every day. That tether became undeniable the night the storm came. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the earth. The power in my house flickered, then died, plunging me into darkness. I lit candles, but the shadows seemed alive, shifting in the corners of my vision. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt strangely calm, because I knew he was near. And he was... A knock came at the back door, low and urgent. When I opened it, Adrian stood there, rain soaking his hair, his shirt clinging to his chest. He looked wild, elemental, like the storm itself had carved him. "You shouldn't be here," I said, though my voice trembled. "Neither should you," he rasped, his eyes burning. "This storm isn't just weather. Something's moving. Something I can't hold back forever." He stepped closer, dripping rain onto the floor, and the heat of him made my breath catch. His gaze fell to my lips before snapping back to my eyes, as if waging a war inside himself. For a moment, I thought he would kiss me. My body ached with the thought, my hands trembling with want. But instead, he pulled back sharply, fists clenching at his sides. "You don't know what I am." "Then tell me," I whispered, heart racing. "Show me." He shook his head, water spraying from his hair. "If I do, you'll never look at me the same." The storm roared outside, rattling the windows, but the greater storm was in the space between us. My pulse hammered as I whispered, "Maybe I already don't." For a long moment he only stared, the golden fire in his eyes burning hotter, brighter, until it felt like the room itself was trembling. And then it happened. His shoulders rippled, his breath turning ragged. His eyes glowed, not human anymore, but something feral and ancient. His jaw tightened, teeth lengthening in a flash of white. His fingers curled as claws broke the skin, sharp and glistening. I stumbled back, heart in my throat. Adrian bowed his head, fighting against it, every muscle trembling with restraint. "This," he growled, voice torn and broken, "is what I am." Lightning flashed, illuminating him in full, not man, not wolf. Something caught in between. And though terror raced through me, a deeper truth surged louder. I wasn't just afraid of him. I was afraid of what I'd do to stay close. For a long time, the only sound in the room was the storm battering against the windows and Adrian's ragged breathing. I pressed my back to the wall, every nerve on fire, my eyes locked on the impossible sight before me. His shoulders heaved as if straining against chains. His hands claws dug into the wood of my floorboards, leaving deep grooves. His teeth glinted in the candlelight, sharper than any human's. And yet his eyes, God, his eyes still found mine, golden, burning, desperate. "Adrian." My voice was barely a whisper, trembling with equal parts fear and need. He shook his head sharply, squeezing his eyes shut, forcing his hands into fists until the claws retracted. His chest rose and fell in violent waves, and with each breath, the monstrous edges softened, retreating, folding back into the man I thought I knew. Finally, he sank to his knees, rainwater dripping from his clothes, his palms flat against the floor as if the effort had torn him apart. "I told you," he rasped, his voice breaking. "You didn't want to see." I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. What are you?" For a moment he didn't answer. The storm outside cracked with thunder, filling the silence with menace. When he finally lifted his head, his expression was raw, shadowed with something like shame. "I'm not meant to be here," he said. "Not in your world. Not near you." "That's not an answer," I whispered. His jaw tightened, It's all I can give you. After that night, nothing felt steady. I went through the motions at the hospital, but every shadow in the corners made me jump. Every sound in the forest seemed alive with meaning. And when I closed my eyes, I saw him half man, half beast, his body caught between two worlds. The strange thing was, the memory didn't only frighten me, it fascinated me. I should have recoiled, should have locked my doors and prayed he'd never return. Instead, my thoughts circled him endlessly, pulled toward the fragments he had revealed. What did he mean, not meant to be here? What world did he belong to, if not mine? And why did he look at me with such sorrow, as if my very existence was a wound he couldn't stop touching? When I finally saw him again, it wasn't in the forest, it was in town. I had stopped at the corner store after a long shift, my arms heavy with grocery bags, when I felt it again, that prickling awareness at the back of my neck. I turned, heart thudding. There he was, standing across the street, half in shadow, half in lamplight. Not a wolf, not a monster, not fully either, just a man. Ragged, out of place, but unmistakably him. My breath hitched. I should have crossed the street, confronted him, demanded answers. Instead, I froze, rooted to the spot by the magnetic pull between us. And then, a child no older than 5 wandered from the store door, toddling toward the curb. A car came fast around the corner, headlights blinding. My stomach lurched before I could react. Adrian moved in less than a heartbeat. He was there, scooping the child up with inhuman speed, hurling them safely back to the sidewalk. The mother screamed, rushing forward, snatching the child from his arms. But when her eyes met his, her face blanched. She whispered something under her breath, something like monster, and dragged her, child, away without another word. Adrian stood frozen, his chest heaving, his jaw clenched. When his eyes found mine across the street, something cracked inside me. He had saved the child, yet she had looked at him with terror. I understood her, and I hated that I did. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed the moment over and over, the way he moved, faster than human, the way the mother recoiled even as he saved her. The truth was undeniable now. He wasn't human, not fully. And yet, I remembered the way he looked when he gave his name. The way his gaze lingered on me, as if I were the only anchor he had left. That was no monster. So why did it feel like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, one step away from falling into something I couldn't escape? The next time we spoke, it was me who found him. He was standing at the edge of the forest again, half hidden in shadow. I didn't hesitate this time. My feet carried me forward before I could second-guess myself. "You can't keep doing this," I said, my voice trembling with anger I barely understood. Showing up, disappearing, expecting me to accept half answers. His eyes burned in the dimness. "You want the truth?" "Yes." He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, until the space between us throbbed with heat and danger. "Then hear it. I am not human. I was never meant to walk in your world. The night you found me, you should have left me there. You should have let me die." My chest tightened painfully. "Don't say that. It's the truth," he said, his voice breaking like glass. "And every moment I stay near you, I risk unraveling everything you know. Everything you are." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "Then why stay?" His gaze locked on mine, raw and unguarded. "Because I can't let you go." The words struck me like a blow, tearing through my defenses. My heart raced, my breath trembling, as if I were already falling. But even as his confession seared me, doubt coiled sharp in my chest. If he wasn't human, if he belonged to another world, then what else was he hiding? What kind of danger was I letting into my life, my home, my heart? That night, Long after he vanished back into the mist, I sat awake in my darkened room, my hands shaking. I wanted him. I feared him. And somewhere deep inside, I began to mistrust him. Because if he could hide this from me, what else was he keeping locked behind those golden eyes? The bond between us was no longer just magnetic, it was fractured. And I didn't know which would break first. My fear, or my heart. Sleep no longer came easily. When it did, it was never kind. I dreamed of fire and gold, his eyes, burning through the shadows of my mind. Sometimes he was a wolf, his breath warm against my neck as though he'd claimed me. Sometimes he was a man, standing too close, his hand brushing mine in a way that left my skin aching long after I woke. Each morning, I rose with a weight in my chest, uncertain where dream ended and desire began. I told myself to stay away, to bury myself in work, in routine, in the ordinary. But nothing ordinary seemed to hold me anymore. Every hallway at the hospital, every street corner in town, every rustle of wind against the trees, I half expected him to appear, his presence like a ghost haunting the edges of my life. And God help me, I wanted him to. One night, after too many sleepless hours, I wandered to the porch. The air was thick with mist, the moon a silver coin drowned in cloud. I should have been afraid of what might wait beyond the trees. But fear was no longer my guide. The forest called to me, not with words, but with the pulse of something deeper, older, and dangerously alive. And then I saw him. Adrian. Half hidden, half revealed, as though the night itself bent around him. His eyes found mine, glowing faintly, a tether pulling taut between us. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though my feet carried me down the steps toward him. His voice was low, rough, a warning wrapped in longing. And yet, here I am. We stood a breath apart, the storm inside me threatening to tear me open. My hands ached to reach for him. My lips burned with words I didn't dare say. Instead, I turned, retreating inside, slamming the door between us. But even as the latch clicked, I pressed my back to the wood and closed my eyes. I could still feel him there, just beyond the barrier, waiting. The next days blurred together. I saw him everywhere in the flicker of shadows, in the amber eyes of stray dogs, in the restless dreams that left me gasping awake. At work, I snapped at colleagues, distracted by thoughts I couldn't share. At home, I drifted from room to room like a restless ghost. The pull was unbearable. It was as if some part of me had been rewritten, tethered to his presence. No matter how I resisted, the cord only tightened, dragging me closer. One evening, exhaustion claimed me. I fell asleep at the kitchen table, my head resting on folded arms. The dream came fast. I was in the forest again, barefoot, the earth damp beneath my skin. The trees loomed like watchful sentinels, and he was there. Adrian. His hand reached for mine, warm and steady, his eyes soft yet burning. "You can't keep running," he murmured. "I'm not," I whispered back, though my heart trembled with the lie. He leaned closer, so close I could feel the heat of his breath against my lips. His scent was wild cedar and storm, sharp and intoxicating. When he kissed me, the dream shattered. I woke with a start, breath ragged, lips tingling as if the touch had been real. And in the silence of my kitchen, I swore I heard footsteps fading into the night. The line between dream and reality blurred after that. Once, walking home from town, I felt the brush of fingers against mine, though no one was beside me. Another time, while I bathed, steam curling around me, I swore I saw golden eyes staring back from the fogged mirror. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was exhaustion, desire, fear twisting into hallucination. But a deeper part of me knew He was close. Always. Watching. Wanting. And I couldn't decide which terrified me more, that he was haunting me, or that I wanted him to. The breaking point came one night when the storm returned. Rain lashed against the windows. The wind howled like wolves in the distance. My power flickered out, plunging the house into darkness. I lit a candle, its small flame trembling. The air was charged, restless, like the forest itself was pressing against the walls of my home. And then he was there. Not a dream. Not a shadow. Adrian stood in the doorway, soaked with rain, his chest rising and falling, as if he had run through the night to reach me. I froze, candlelight dancing across his face, catching the sharp edges of his beauty and the inhuman flicker in his gaze. "You shouldn't be here," I breathed. The same words I'd said before. He stepped inside, closing the door with a quiet finality. "Neither should you. Not in my world. Not in this storm." His words should have sent me running, but they only pulled me closer. The silence between us throbbed. My pulse echoed in my ears. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the ache of wanting what I shouldn't. Finally, I broke. "Then why do you keep coming back?" His eyes burned, the truth spilling through them even if his lips refused to say it. He stepped closer, until the candlelight flickered between us, throwing shadows across his face. "Because," he whispered, "I can't stay away." The air thickened, the storm outside forgotten. Every barrier I had built crumbled in that moment. I should have resisted. I should have turned away. Instead, I stood still as he reached out, his fingers brushing against mine, tentative yet electric. The touch was brief, barely there, but it set me alight. My breath catching, my body leaning closer before I could stop myself. Temptation stood between us. No longer ignorable, no longer contained. And I knew, with a certainty that terrified me, that resisting him was no longer an option. The storm passed, but its shadow lingered. For days after Adrian stepped into my home, I couldn't shake the memory of his touchlight, fleeting yet heavy with promise. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hunger in his gaze, the war inside him, as if he'd been fighting something far greater than me. But the storm hadn't just carried him to my door. It had carried something else too. It began with whispers in town. Mrs. Cartwright, who ran the little flower shop, lowered her voice when she saw me. "Strange men asking questions," she said, arranging roses with trembling fingers. "Big men, not from here. They asked if anyone new had passed through. Wolves, they said. Have you seen wolves?" Her words sliced through me. My heart stuttered, my mind racing back to the night I found the wounded wolf on the road. I shook my head, muttering something about hunters, but Mrs. Cartwright's eyes lingered, suspicious. The town was too small to hide secrets. And now, it seemed, the secret I had stumbled into was bleeding through the cracks. That night, sleep refused to come. The air felt wrong, charged, as though unseen eyes pressed against my windows. Around midnight, I heard low growls from the woods. Not the restless howls of wild wolves, but something darker, sharper. Filled with rage, I rose, barefoot, and crept to the porch. The forest loomed like a wall of black, the trees shifting in the wind. And then I saw them. Shadows too. Maybe 3 moving between the trees, larger than wolves should be, their eyes catching faint glimmers of light. Watching, waiting. My breath froze in my throat. Then, a hand touched my shoulder. I spun. Gasping, Adrian stood there, silent, his face carved in stone, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Inside," he said, voice sharp, but now Something in his tone left no room for argument. I obeyed, heart pounding, as he followed me in and locked the door. The silence inside was deafening, broken only by the beating of my heart. Who were they? I whispered. Adrian didn't answer at first. His jaw clenched, his hands flexing at his sides as though struggling to hold something back. Finally, he spoke. They're not men. Not really. They're hunters. I frowned. Hunters? Of wolves? His gaze flicked to mine, fierce and unflinching. Of me. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. My chest tightened, air thin and sharp. Why? I asked, though part of me already feared the answer. Adrian's eyes darkened. Because I'm not what they want me to be. Because I walked away from a war they still fight. And because you saved me when I should have been left to die. His words hung heavy, thick with meaning I couldn't yet grasp. But one truth was clear. Whatever hunted him, now hunted me too. The next day brought no relief. At the hospital, whispers followed me, strangers asking questions. Stories of livestock gone missing. Tracks too large to belong to ordinary wolves. I tried to focus on my patients, but unease gnawed at me, each tick of the clock dragging heavier. When my shift ended, I lingered in the parking lot, scanning the shadows. My car felt too small, too exposed. And then I saw it again, movement across the street. A figure, tall, broad-shouldered, watching me with an intensity that froze my blood. When I blinked, he was gone. I drove home with trembling hands, headlights cutting through fog like blades. Every tree seemed alive, every shadow waiting to pounce. Adrian was already there, waiting in the dark of my living room. I startled at the sight of him, but relief quickly followed. They're getting closer, he said without preamble. His clothes were damp with rain, his hair disheveled, his expression grim. You have to tell me the truth, I demanded. My voice wavered, but I held his gaze. What are they? What are you? His silence stretched long, painful. Finally, he sighed, the weight of centuries in that single sound. I'm not just a man, and I'm not just a wolf. I'm something between, something older. I was born into a pack that believed in dominance, in blood. But I rejected it. I ran. And those men you saw, they'll never forgive me for it. I swallowed hard, my pulse roaring in my ears. Why? Because leaving means betrayal. And betrayal means death. His words chilled me to the bone. The storm outside thickened again, thunder rumbling low. Adrian moved closer, his presence filling the room like heat from a fire. You should leave this place, he said softly, almost pleading. Go far away, before it's too late. But even as he spoke, I knew I couldn't. The thought of leaving him, of abandoning him to face whatever hunted him, felt like a betrayal of my own heart. I can't, I whispered. Our eyes locked, and for a moment, everything else, the hunters, the storm, the fear fell away. Only the pull remained, fierce and undeniable. But before the silence could shift into something more, a crash shattered it. Glass splintered. The window burst inward, the wind whipping the curtains like torn wings. And in the chaos, I saw them, two figures, massive and inhuman, eyes glowing like coals, snarling as they forced their way inside. Adrian shoved me behind him, his body trembling, shifting. As though something within him clawed to be free. My heart thundered, the truth slamming into me with brutal clarity. The threat was real, and it was already here. The attackers didn't stay long. Adrian fought them back with a ferocity I could barely comprehend, half-shifted, his body trembling with the strain of containing what wanted to break free. I caught only flashes, a growl that rattled the walls, claws glinting in the stormlight, eyes blazing with an inhuman fire. And then it was over. The intruders fled into the woods, shadows swallowed by the storm. My house lay in ruined broken glass, overturned furniture, the air thick with the scent of blood and rain. But it wasn't the damage to my home that left me trembling. It was what Adrian had almost become. Before my eyes, and the truth that I couldn't unsee. We didn't speak for a long time after. Paced the shattered room, chest heaving, while I clutched a blanket around my shoulders, my hands shaking. Finally I whispered, "You can't keep hiding it." His jaw tightened. He looked away, golden eyes dimming to something closer to human. "You shouldn't have seen," he said, voice hoarse. "You weren't meant to." But it was too late. I had seen. And I couldn't go back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like an intruder returning. Every flicker of lightning illuminated Adrian's silhouette in the corner, a silent guardian who didn't rest. I drifted between wakefulness and dreams until finally, something else pulled me awake. A voice, not Adrian's. A woman's whisper, curling like smoke around me. "The wolf finds you because he always has. The blood calls. It always calls." I sat upright, heart pounding. The room was empty except for Adrian, who hadn't stirred. But the words lingered in my ears, too clear to be imagination. The blood calls. The next morning, I visited my grandmother's house. She had passed years ago, leaving her little cabin at the edge of town locked and abandoned. But something in me needed to be there, to sift through the relics of her life, searching for answers I didn't yet understand. The air inside smelled of dust and cedar. Faded curtains drooped over narrow windows. On the mantel, her photograph stared back at me, sharp eyes, lined face. A woman who always seemed to know more than she ever said. I searched her old cedar chest, pulling out quilted blankets, brittle letters, a leather-bound book so old its spine cracked beneath my touch. Inside the book were words. I couldn't quite decipher strange symbols, looping handwriting in a language not quite English. But I understood enough. The word Lycaeus appeared again and again. Beside it, sketches of wolves beneath the moon. And then, my family's name, repeated, underlined, tied to words like oath and bloodline. My stomach twisted, a cold realization blooming in my chest. This wasn't just Adrian's world. Somehow it was mine too. I stumbled back from the chest, breath ragged, the whispers from the night before echoing louder. The blood calls. Had my grandmother known? Had she carried this secret her whole life, letting it fester in silence until it reached me? I tried to piece it together, but the pages blurred, the words slipping from me like water through my fingers. And then Adrian appeared in the doorway. His presence filled the cabin, dark and watchful. "You shouldn't be here," he said. I held up the book, my voice shaking. "You knew." His jaw tightened. He stepped forward, careful, as though approaching something fragile and dangerous at once. "Yes," he admitted, finally. "I knew. From the moment I saw you on that road, I knew." "Knew what?" My voice cracked. "That your blood isn't ordinary. That you're tied to this world whether you want to be or not." The room swayed. I gripped the mantel to keep from collapsing. "No," I whispered. "That can't be true." But Adrian's gaze was merciless, golden eyes burning with a truth I couldn't deny. "Your grandmother was bound to my kind. An oath made generations ago. You are the echo of that promise. You are why they come." The words fell heavy, each one striking like a hammer. Bound. Promise. Blood. My life, my family. Everything I thought I knew, it wasn't mine alone. It was part of something older, darker, written long before I was born. I sank to the floor, the book slipping from my hands. All this time, and no one told me. Adrian crouched beside me, his presence overwhelming, his hand hovering as though he wanted to touch me but didn't dare. "You weren't meant to carry it," he said softly. "But now it's awake. And once the blood calls, it can't be silenced." Tears burned my eyes. I wanted to deny it, to scream that it wasn't true. But deep down, something inside me stirred like recognition, like a memory I'd never known I had. The wolves, the whispers, the dreams. They weren't accidents. They were inheritance. I don't remember how long I sat there, numb, staring at the broken pieces of the truth. But when I finally looked at Adrian, his expression made my heart twist. He wasn't gloating. He wasn't triumphant. He looked almost, "Sorry, you deserve the truth," he murmured. "But the truth will tear you apart." I shook my head, unable to answer. My world had cracked open and nothing would ever fit back together again. That night, I sat in my grandmother's cabin alone, the book open across my lap. The words still blurred, but the symbols etched themselves into my mind. Sharp and unrelenting. Lycaios. Bloodline. Oath dot and through the silence. The whisper came again, curling like smoke. The wolf finds you because he always has. The blood cools. It always cools. My hands trembled as I closed the book, the sound echoing in the stillness. And in that moment, I understood. This wasn't just Adrian's fight, it was mine. The air in my apartment felt heavier than usual. Even the usual hum of the city outside seemed muted, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I stared at the remnants of the book in my hands. The edges curled, pages still damp from rain. Words blurring in my mind. Every symbol, every sentence felt like a knife twisting in a wound I didn't know I had. And yet, even with this revelation, the bloodline, the oath, the inheritance, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust Adrian. I wanted to trust him with everything. But the storm had shifted. Something between us when he arrived that evening. Dripping and silent as always, I realized just how fragile our connection had become. His golden eyes were softer than the night we met, but there was an edge of caution there, a tension I hadn't noticed before. "You've been avoiding me," he said simply. "I've been trying to process," I replied, voice quieter than I intended. Adrian didn't argue. He simply leaned against the wall, arms crossed, silent. The pause stretched too long, filled with unspoken questions. Finally, I asked the one thing that had been burning in my chest. "Why didn't you tell me the truth sooner? About who you are, about the hunters, about the bloodline?" He looked away, jaw tight. "Because I wanted to protect you. Every secret I've kept. It was for your safety." I frowned. "And yet, here we are. They nearly broke into my home, and you almost became something I didn't recognize. How is that protecting me?" Adrian's eyes darkened, his body tensing. "Because sometimes protecting means keeping them in the dark until they can face the truth." I took a step back. The words felt like a cage around my chest. Was he right? Or was this another lie? Another fragment of truth designed to keep me close, while keeping me in ignorance. Days passed. Every time I saw him, I wanted to believe him. To reach across the distance, touch his hand, let the warmth of him dissolve the fear. But every shadow, every whisper, every flicker of movement reminded me that the danger was real. And so was the uncertainty at work. I found myself tense, distracted. Even the simplest tasks, checking vitals, administering medications, felt like exercises in futility. My mind raced, imagining him in the woods, imagining hunters circling, imagining the bond between us shattering like glass under invisible pressure. I tried to push the thoughts aside, tried to convince myself that love could outweigh danger, that trust could conquer suspicion, that every moment away from him stretched the tension thinner. Like a wire straining toward breaking dot, it wasn't long before the first test came. A letter slipped under my door one night, unsigned, the ink smeared from rain. I unfolded it carefully. She belongs to the wolf. Do not think you can protect her. He will fail. You will all fail. My hands shook as I read the words again. They were a warning, a threat, but from whom? A hunter? One of Adrian's enemies? Or someone closer? Someone who wanted to see me hurt? Adrian appeared behind me then, silent as a shadow. I know, he said softly. You do? I demanded, my voice trembling. How? Because I've been tracking them. They're organized. They're clever. And they know about you, your blood, your heritage. You were never meant to be in this world. But now that you are, they see you as leverage. I swallowed hard, the letter crumpling slightly in my hands. And you didn't tell me. His gaze pierced mine, unreadable. I didn't want to frighten you. Not until you understood what you were facing. The words should have comforted me, but instead, they ignited a spark of mistrust. Every secret, every omission felt like another thread pulling at the bond we were supposed to share. The tension grew in subtle ways. Adrian would vanish for hours without explanation, returning with a calm that didn't reach his eyes. I would find scraps of torn clothing in the woods, tracks I didn't recognize, or shadows that moved when no one was there. And every time he returned, golden eyes soft but unreadable, I asked myself the same question. What else is he hiding? Sometimes I thought the answer didn't matter. Sometimes I wanted to believe in the man beneath the wolf, the soul I had come to crave. But every test, every half-truth, every moment of danger reminded me that trust was fragile, that love could be weaponized. The breaking point came. During a visit to the forest, I had followed him, unable to resist, drawn to the pull that had haunted me since the day I found him. The trees were thick with mist, and the air carried the scent of rain and earth. I expected to find him waiting, but instead, I stumbled across a meeting I wasn't meant to see. Two figures emerged from the shadows. Men I didn't recognize. They spoke in low voices, clipped, urgent. She doesn't know the full truth. He can't keep her safe, one said. Then we'll force it, the other replied, teeth flashing in a smile that made my stomach twist. Adrian stepped from the trees at that moment, and I froze, caught between relief and fear. Leave, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The men faltered, but only briefly. One looked at me and laughed. She's tied to this world. Her blood marks her. There's no escaping it. Adrian's eyes flared, and in that instant, I understood the depth of what he had been hiding. The power, the danger, the secrets. But I also realized something else. There were gaps in what he had told me. Omissions that could change everything. And in that moment, mistrust took root, sharp and bitter. I wanted to run to him, to throw myself into his arms and demand answers. But part of me wanted to run from him as well, from the man who hid truths while claiming to protect me. That night, I sat in my apartment, the shadows stretching across the walls. My thoughts a tangled knot of fear and longing. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him, but I couldn't, not fully, because every secret, every fragment of danger, every omission had created a chasm between us. And I didn't know if we could cross it, or if it would swallow us both whole. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the promise of more threats, more lies. More tests of the bond I had thought unbreakable. And somewhere in the shadows I felt it, Adrian watching, waiting. Golden eyes both pleading and warning. Trust had become the most dangerous thing of all. The days that followed were heavy with a sense of impending doom. Even the morning air felt different, laden with tension, as if the trees themselves were watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes lurked in every shadow, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And they weren't just shadows anymore. They were moving, breathing threats. It began subtly. At work, I noticed strange faces in the hallways. Outsiders. Strangers with sharp eyes and sharper intent. They asked questions too pointed, lingered too long, smiled too little. The hospital's usual calm had been replaced with a subtle unease. Whispers following me like ghosts. One evening I left my shift exhausted, only to find my car vandalized, scratches across the doors forming shapes too precise to be random. A deep, deliberate gouge ran along the hood, accompanied by a single word carved into the metal. Blood. My stomach churned. They were closer than I had imagined. And Adrian hadn't warned me. That night, I tried to reach him, but his voice on the phone was tense and clipped. Stay inside. Don't go out. They're watching. Who is watching? I demanded, heart pounding. They know, he said, voice low, urgent. And they're coming for you. The words sent chills down my spine. I hung up, hands shaking, my apartment suddenly feeling too exposed, too fragile. Every creak, every rustle of wind against the windows sounded like footsteps closing in. The next morning, I found a note slipped under my door. You can't hide from the wolf, and you can't escape your blood. Tonight you'll understand what it means. Fear gripped me, sharp and unrelenting. My pulse roared in my ears. The note wasn't a threat, it was a promise. I knew, without a doubt, that the danger wasn't coming for Adrian. It was coming for me. And for the first time, I realized the hunters weren't just targeting a lone wolf. They were targeting both of us. I left the apartment cautiously, hoping to spot Adrian before he spotted me. But the streets were empty, heavy with mist. Even the usual traffic seemed muted, the air thick with anticipation. I didn't notice the figure until it was too late. A hand clamped over my mouth from behind, strong and unyielding. I struggled, kicking, twisting, but the grip only tightened. Panic surged as I felt myself dragged backward into the shadowed alley. Golden eyes flashed in the darkness. Adrian! I gasped, relief flooding into fear as his voice echoed. Low and fierce, he appeared out of nowhere, body moving faster than human, shoving the figure holding me away with a force that sent them sprawling across the wet cobblestones. But even as I stumbled into his arms, I realized it wasn't over. The alley was too quiet, too narrow, too easy for more to corner us. We ran. Rain lashing against us, slipping through twisting back streets I barely recognized. Adrian's grip on my wrist was firm, protective. But even as we ducked into shadows, I could feel it, the eyes, watching us, calculating, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Who are they? I panted, trying to catch my breath. Hunters, he said, voice low and urgent. They've been waiting for someone with your bloodline. And now that they know, they won't stop. My pulse thundered. But why me? Adrian's gaze softened for the briefest second, shadowed with regret. Because you're tied to this world. Tied to me. And tied to a past you never knew existed. They see you as leverage, and they'll use every means to get what they want. I shivered, realizing the depth of my danger. It wasn't just physical, they were after my life, my heritage. The very blood coursing through my veins. The night stretched on in a blur of rain and fear. We ducked into an abandoned warehouse, hoping the shadows would conceal us. The space smelled of damp wood and rust, and every echo of our footsteps sounded amplified. I pressed myself against Adrian, feeling the warmth of him, the steady pulse beneath his skin, trying to draw courage from it. But the closeness didn't ease my fear. It only reminded me of the stakes. Why didn't you tell me the full truth? I demanded, voice trembling. About the hunters? About how dangerous this is? He hesitated, eyes dark with burden. I wanted to protect you. I wanted to shield you from the world I came from the enemies I've made. But now it's too late. I wanted to hate him, wanted to scream that he had failed me. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized the truth. He hadn't failed. The danger existed because it always had. And he was the only one who could stand between it and me. Yet mistrust lingered. Sharp and bitter. And then we heard them. Footsteps on metal, echoes in the cavernous space, shadows moving faster than humans should. They were inside. Adrian stepped in front of me, body taut, muscles coiled. His voice dropped to a growl. Stay behind me. I wanted to argue, to run, to hide, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped between fear and the magnetic pull I felt for him. The first hunter appeared, a tall figure cloaked in darkness. Their eyes gleamed with malice. Adrian's body shifted slightly, a tremor passing through him that made my heart hammer. I realized he was holding himself back, keeping the wolf contained, holding the beast at bay for my sake. Another step, another figure, and then another. We were surrounded. The walls pressed in. The shadows closed around us. And in that moment, I understood the truth of our situation. We weren't just running out of time. We were running out of options. The rain outside hissed against the roof, the storm echoing the chaos within. I clutched Adrian's arm. Fear and need tangled together, and for the first time, I felt the weight of my own bloodline, the inheritance I had barely begun to understand, pressing down on me like a chain. Adrian, I whispered, voice trembling. What do we do? His golden eyes met mine, sharp and unreadable, filled with a storm of their own. We fight, he said, voice low, fierce, because if we don't, we won't survive the night. I swallowed, nodding, even as my heart threatened to betray me. The shadows were closing in, and there was nowhere left to run. The warehouse still smelled of damp metal and fear, but for the first time in days I felt something else, an electric current running between us. Impossible to ignore. Adrian stood close, golden eyes flickering with shadows and warmth. Every muscle in his body seemed coiled, ready for battle. Yet even amid the danger, there was an unspoken pull, one I could no longer deny. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my hands trembling as I brushed against him while moving to adjust a loose beam of metal. Every contact, however slight, ignited something deep inside me. I shouldn't. I began, voice barely audible. You shouldn't what? His tone was low, teasing, but the intensity in his gaze left no room for games. I swallowed, heart hammering. Feel this pull between us. He stepped closer, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. The space between us shrank until our breaths mingled, and I couldn't remember how to think, how to reason, how to resist. I can't stop it either, he admitted, voice rough, raw with emotion. Even if I wanted to, even if it's dangerous, even if it could destroy everything. The words wrapped around me like a ribbon of fire. Impossible to ignore. My hands trembled, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed both warning and desire. The storm outside had eased, leaving a quiet, almost sacred tension in its wake. I wanted to reach for him, to close the distance and let the bond we'd fought to deny finally claim us. But fear held me in check, fear for my life, for his life, for the fragile thread of trust between us. The hunters were still out there. They wouldn't hesitate. And every moment of closeness was a risk, a vulnerability I couldn't fully surrender to. Adrian's hand brushed against mine, tentative but electric. My breath caught. The world shrank until it was only us. The storm faded into memory, danger reduced to a dull hum beneath the rising thrum of our own hearts. I've never, I started, voice shaky, felt anything like this. He smiled faintly, a mixture of longing and pain. Nor have I, and yet, it's undeniable. It's here, between us. I swallowed, my body leaning closer, drawn as if by gravity, drawn to the man behind the wolf, the beast behind the golden eyes. We moved instinctively closer, and for a moment, nothing existed except the space between our lips. The magnetism pulling us together. And then, as if the universe itself refused to allow us the fleeting moment, the warehouse shivered with sound. Footsteps. Heavy. Deliberate. Adrian stiffened instantly, his body a barrier between me and the unknown threat. His hand gripped mine, dragging me back into shadow. They found us, he whispered, voice tense, low. Every muscle coiled for action. My heart slammed against my ribs, not just from fear, but from the intensity of our near touch, the sudden shift from desire to survival. Adrenaline surged, and suddenly, the forbiddance pull between us felt both like a lifeline and a risk. The shadows moved before I could see clearly. Figures emerging from the doorway, tall and menacing, eyes glinting in the faint light. I tried to step back, but Adrian's grip tightened on my wrist, anchoring me to him, shielding me, holding me in place. We can't fight them all, I whispered, voice trembling. We don't have to, he replied, jaw set, eyes flaring with gold. But we have to be ready, and we have to move now. I nodded, though the pull between us refused to release me. Even in the face of imminent danger, the magnetic force tugged at my chest, my hands, my lips. He leaned just slightly, a whisper away from the forbiddance moment we both craved. My heart raced, and I could almost feel the warmth of him, the rough edge of his breath against my skin. And then, a loud crash echoed from behind the shadows. Something heavy hit the floor. Metal screeched. The sudden sound shattered the delicate tension, yanking us both violently from the near kiss. Adrian's head snapped toward the noise, eyes glowing, muscles tensed like coiled steel. They're inside, he growled. His voice was a low, predatory rumble that made my chest tighten in both fear and longing. I stumbled back, barely aware of my own movements, heart hammering with the frustration of desire interrupted, the terror of threat pressing closer, and the undeniable truth. We were no longer alone. The shadows surged. Figures emerged from the corners, moving fast, deliberate, and dangerous. Adrian stepped in front of me, body rigid, golden eyes blazing. Stay behind me, he commanded. I obeyed, but my body still ached with the almost touch, the electric energy of our connection, the impossible intensity of our forbidden attraction. The warehouse felt smaller, the darkness closer, the danger nearer. And I knew if we didn't act fast, if we didn't protect each other, we could be lost before the moment we had been pulled toward could ever exist. The storm outside may have passed, but inside, it raged stronger than ever. And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. Desire could be as dangerous as any hunter. and the moment we were denied, moment we were interrupted, had left us more exposed than ever. Because now, we were both aware of the intensity between us, and the enemies closing in weren't going to wait. The storm outside had returned. Rain thrashing against the warehouse windows like the fists of a vengeful spirit. Inside, the air was thick with tension, both the kind that comes from fear and the kind that comes from desire restrained. Adrian's body was taut, every muscle coiled, eyes glowing like molten gold. He had shifted slightly, wolfish features just brushing the edge of human form, his claws flexing against the concrete floor. I could see the restraint in him, the battle to stay in control, to protect me without giving in completely to the beast within. And then, without warning, it began. The first hunter lunged from the shadows, blade glinting in the dim light. Adrian reacted instantly, moving faster than my eyes could follow. His form blurred, strength and speed magnified, the partial shift giving him an otherworldly advantage. I tried to move, tried to help, but the danger surged around me like a tidal wave. One of the hunters came from the other side, forcing me against the wall, my chest pressed against cold bricks, my hands pinned helplessly. Fear clawed at me, sharp and cold, as I realized I was utterly exposed. Adrian's growl cut through the chaos, a sound that made the blood in my veins turn to ice and fire all at once. He tore through the first attacker with feral precision. But another figure stepped in, stronger, faster, and more ruthless. My heart pounded as the fight escalated. Claws, fists, and sheer will colliding in a symphony of violence. I could neither intervene in nor look away from Dot. And then I saw it, the flash of recognition that shattered everything. One of the hunters carried an emblem, a symbol I had glimpsed before in the book at my grandmother's house. The same mark tied to the oath, tied to my bloodline. "They know," I whispered, barely audible, my voice trembling. "They know everything." Adrian's golden eyes met mine, but something had shifted. His body tensed not at the threat, but at me. For a brief, unbearable second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his gaze. A question I didn't understand. "Stay back," he barked, but the command carried an edge of hesitation. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was frozen by fear and by the sudden realization that, for all our closeness, he hadn't told me everything. Not about his enemies, not about their power, not about what they would do if they caught me. The battle reached a fever pitch. Metal clanged. Wood splintered, the sound of raw strength against raw determination echoing off the walls. Adrian fought with all he had, but every swing, every claw, every growl came with a price. He staggered for the briefest instant, and I knew without thinking that the moment had come when trust alone couldn't save either of us. I screamed his name, desperate, and ran forward, intent on helping. But the hunter nearest me lunged, catching my arm in a vice-like grip. Pain shot through my shoulder, and I cried out. Adrian's eyes blazed, a guttural roar escaping his throat that made my knees buckle. His claws slashed through the shadows, faster than lightning, tearing the threat away, but not before another figure knocked me to the ground, forcing me into the cold, wet floor. I scrambled back, trembling, as the realization hit me in waves of nausea and fear. Even with Adrian's power, even with his half-shifted strength, they had us cornered. We were trapped. And in that moment, the bond I had trusted, the magnetic pull between us, the trust, the desire, it faltered, because I realized something that made my chest constrict with terror. He hadn't told me everything. He had withheld details, decisions, secrets. And even as he fought, I wondered, had he ever really planned to save me? Or had I been a tool? A means to something else entirely, something tied to my bloodline. My inheritance, the oath I barely understood. The thought shattered me, splitting my heart into two. One half yearning for him, the other screaming in betrayal. Adrian fought his way to me, dragging me behind him as another hunter came at us from the shadows. His golden eyes softened for the briefest instant, just long enough for my heart to clench with longing. "Trust me," he growled, voice low and desperate. But I couldn't. Not fully. Not now. I don't know if I can. I shouted, my words lost in the storm of blows and snarls. I don't know if I should. You've lied. You've hidden things from me. He froze mid-step, claws extended, tension rippling across his body. Pain, anger, and regret crossed his face all at once. He began, but a powerful blow from behind forced him to duck, and I realized the moment to reconcile, to bridge the gap of trust, had vanished in the chaos of battle. By the time the fight subsided, by the time the last hunter fled into the night, the damage had been done. Adrian and I were both drenched in rain and sweat, bruised and trembling, our bond stretched to breaking. The intensity of our emotions, the attraction that had grown impossible to deny, now felt like a knife between us. I looked at him, searching for the man I had trusted, the wolf I had come to care for, but the golden eyes that met mine were unreadable, shadowed with pain and regret. "I need space," I whispered, voice shaking. I can't do this right now." Adrian's lips parted, as if to speak, but he didn't. His hands fell to his sides, tense and trembling, his body coiled with restraint and loss. I turned away, stepping into the night, the rain soaking through me as if it could wash away the ache in my chest. And even as I disappeared into the mist, I felt it, his gaze following me, burning into my back, filled with questions, longing, and the weight of the bond we could no longer trust. The storm had passed, but the damage remained. And in the quiet aftermath, I realized something unbearable. Our connection had fractured, the wolf and the human, the protector and the one he protected. They had been torn apart. By secrets, by danger, by the breaking point. The rain had stopped, but the world felt colder than ever. The streets were deserted, shadows stretching long and jagged across the cracked pavement. Every sound, the drip of water from rooftops, the distant echo of a dog barking felt amplified, a warning that danger lurked everywhere. And I was alone. Alone with the fear that had clawed its way into my chest since the warehouse. Alone with the ache of betrayal. And alone with the gnawing realization that the hunters hadn't finished with me. I moved cautiously, hugging the walls of alleyways, avoiding the flickering streetlights that made the darkness feel alive. My hands were numb, my mind racing with fragmented thoughts. Adrian's half-truths, the unfinished battle, the secrecy, the pull I could no longer ignore. Every step was a test. Every shadow a potential threat, and with each heartbeat, I felt the weight of my bloodline pressing down on me, a weight I barely understood, a responsibility I hadn't yet accepted. I didn't know how long I walked, guided more by instinct than reason, until I found myself at the outskirts of the old forest, the same woods where I had first rescued the wounded wolf, not knowing then that he was more than he seemed.